So,
absolutely.
We'll take that all in. Sam, great piece this week. You had a chance to talk to Scott Perry about the Kings and their kind of current status and the status going forward. There's a lot to dive in, but I'm just going to start in a generality on the piece. What was yours, someone that was, had the chance to talk to him, maybe your biggest takeaway from your conversation with Scott?
Well, I think probably the fact that even with, his tone and the delivery and the way that he went back to certain messages, it's that, real obvious recognition that the thing that he's asking for from the fans is not easy to ask for, which is, there's not going to be a quick fix, which is that it is unclear how long it might take. I think it was smart of him and the organization to, it's just life in general, to look problems in the face and acknowledge the frustration of the fans. And certainly it's funny, the feedback I got from, my actual circle as opposed to the old comment section was very different. The comment section thought that it was, a lot of propaganda and a lot of empty words, but it seemed like it landed with a lot of fans. But I think, the frustration level had where they, Scott knew that something had to be done about it. But the specifics are hard because what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and talk about individual players and how you see their market. It's just a tricky spot to be in.
Yeah, when I first went through it too, I thought that was interesting that, and he does kind of have to, he deserves patience, whether the fan base can give it. I mean, I get it. They've been through a lot of losing here, but the other part where he was very upfront with you about the autonomy part, that he's going to have his autonomy in doing this his way. I thought that was interesting that he made that a point of emphasis. What was your read on that? Oh, we lost Sam. We lost Sam in mid-question. All right, so he is en route. We are going to get him back. We promise you. Sam obviously writes for The Athletic. He usually joins us each and every Thursday, and it's a central figure to a lot of NBA news, what he's able to do and how connected he is. And I think we got to get much more into this article because I have several notes here that I have written down and questions that I want to ask Sam. So we're going to get back to this one. I know Chris is getting it back online, and so I think we got Sam here. So let's Sam, we're going to bring you back up. I was asking about the fact that Scott openly told you about the autonomy part, that he has that. That's something he's going to have. That took me a little bit. Not that I expected it to be different, but the fact that he brought it up to you. What was your read on that?
Yeah, I agree. And sorry about the technical difficulties there, buddy. I agree because, the way you see it in the story is the way it was, where it's like, all right, we just get started. But not much has been said. And then, if you want to unpack kind of things that it was clear that Scott wanted to make sure that he included, like any of us, if you're having a kind of a meaningful conversation like that, like unsolicited for him to kind of tack on to his first collection of thoughts that, and I forget his exact phrasing, but it was like, I think it should be noted that I'm going to have full autonomy here. Again, let's not forget that Scott spent 3 months here back in 2017 with Vlade Divac in the front office when, he was well aware of the dynamics and part of his job and really part of his value at that time was that he had done a better job than most of navigating the Vivek factor when it comes to ownership involvement and, kind of lack of autonomy from the front office. So it was a short 3-month stint, but he knew all about the dynamics. And so, yeah, I think I agree with you. For him to basically signal, like, if I say nothing else in this interview, that part is going to be shared with the fans that I promise you I am being allowed to run this thing.
And the two parts we've already discussed for Scott, whether it's kind of wanting or requesting patience maybe from the fans and his, belief that he's going to have autonomy, which one, I don't know, is more important to his success? I mean, I guess maybe the fans don't have a direct impact, but maybe they do. Do you think patience is more important for him or the autonomy part is more important for his success?
I mean, I would suppose the autonomy because nobody wants to not be given some, leeway to do the job they were hired to do. Now, that's not a guarantee that the moves he makes are going to work. It does, though, create a healthier system where, if let's just say that for the sake of discussion, he's able, Vivek is able to deliver on this and can give Scott autonomy going forward. Then the fans can judge Scott on the moves that he made and that Vivek approved. The latter, as far as the fan frustration, that's a Vivek issue. I don't think, Scott's been here for 5 minutes, so to speak.
Right.
It's funny because I don't know this for a fact. It's pure speculation. But if you ask me, why do you think Scott chose to talk on the record when he did, think about the timing. It's Saturday, it's Friday night, Saturday afternoon, and then we talk Saturday afternoon, and they're in Denver. They've lost 8 in a row. On paper, it looks like they're about to lose 9 in a row. And then you have a home game against Minnesota and a fairly lengthy homestand where the frustration of the fans was at a fever pitch. And, I think, honestly, that component is a Vivek problem. That, if they lost 9 in a row and folks were in a different headspace when the T-Wolves came to town, then what's the messaging from the fans in the arena? And I think that pressure is on the owner because of all the history with him, as opposed to Scott just being hired to clean it up a few months ago.
Yeah, another piece that you asked that I thought was a good question was kind of where they are in this. It was, again, on the heels of this 8-game losing streak. They've won 2 in a row. Not sure if that's going to continue or, go back and forth here. This team has certainly struggled to be at where they are now. But you asked about playing the vets versus trying to get in some of the younger guys. I think Doug's trying to get a little bit of both, but it's still primarily a vet-oriented team. Do you think any of that will change or could change, Sam, without a trade? Because I feel like trades will lead to that. I think that'll unblock some things and make it a little easier. But if they don't, it still has a roster of some pretty decent veteran players that probably will get the majority of the minutes. What do you think about kind of that conundrum they're in a little bit right now?
Well, and tell me, without having the roster right in front of me, who are the candidates for who are being blocked the most by the vets from a developmental standpoint? And before you answer, it's all right, the Sabonis injury actually, opens up obviously a lot of time for Maxime Reynad, and he's one of the few players, I think it's worth saying, Scott only highlighted a few certain players, on the record in our discussion. You don't need to, it's not hard to connect dots about how he sees their roster. So, Maxine's getting playing time. Nick Clifford, has got to be developed. From there, a lot of folks wished I would have asked Scott about Keon Ellis, and that's fair because I know he's a fan favorite. I think part of me is it's tricky when you're talking to the GM about coaches' decisions, and the front office plays a role there. But I think that that messaging from Scott at that time reflects also the reality of the situation with the vets, which is if you're going to roll over, which they were doing at the time, then sure, we'll find a bunch of other options. Because I think that was the frustration on that road trip was, you had Zach LaVine playing like Jekyll and Hyde. You had DeMar playing like Jekyll and Hyde, to the point where, some folks are looking at box scores and going, okay, is this a quiet protest? Why are you not shooting? It's that energy was pretty bad. And, but if they're going to play like they did the last couple of days, that's a different story.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about development from that. It was the last game. It was a great game, great comeback to beat Minnesota. They played really well. They got the victory. But I thought the takeaway I had, Sam, at the conclusion of the game was the postgame where DeMar DeRozan went out of his way to basically say, this is Keegan Murray's team. He means everything to the team. And that's a clip I had not heard. I had not heard anybody else say it. Now, contract-wise and where he signed, that would lead that to be that. But for a team that's filled with veterans and prideful veterans and guys that will be in the Hall of Fame later, that surprised me a bit. Where do you think what did you think about that statement, and do you agree with it being Keegan's team going forward?
Honestly, Jay, I kind of loved it. And now I'm going to sound like the hype man looking for silver linings for Kings fans. That's a big deal because when when Scott and his staff looked at Keegan's situation and had to spend really months figuring out what kind of number to give him extension-wise. And, I think we talked back at the time that it started in the Jabari Smith territory, which was like 5 for 120, and then eventually gets to, I think, 5 for 143. That extension was pretty significantly criticized around the league just as being too rich. And the Kings calculus that was I think like a make or break component of the deal is like with Keegan, it's like, all right, you've shown some potential at times that maybe you could be a number 1 or a number 2 option on a good team. But when all these vets came to town, he was pretty passive. And it was like, I get it, human nature wise, you look around and see guys who might wind up in the Hall of Fame and you're not aggressive. I give Keegan credit, and I think he needs to continue down this road. Like, literally, if he can have a level up this season, and if he can realize that extension literally means that he's far and away the only player on this team who can say that, I've been established as part of the future here, if I can live up to that. I mean, that's the thing, is if he's going to be a 3 or 4 option on that contract, then it's going to be, honestly, that will be a miss for Scott and his staff. That's not 3 and 4 option money. And so Keegan showing some of his potential in the way that he has, and his teammates supporting it in the way they have, is a pretty big development to me.
Talking with Sam Amick from The Athletic just earlier this week, released a conversation and some points that you had with Scott Perry. Some other takeaways for me, Sam, in that conversation. You did address with him about kind of the desire to eventually move on from some of the veterans that they have, some of the bigger contracts, and DeMar's mentioned Sabonis, Zach LaVine. One of the things that I found interesting too was Zach was brought up was you didn't have clarity on maybe from Zach's camp whether or not they would be interested in opting out. Most people would look at that and go, there's no way he would, but maybe there is a way when players could kind of choose their next fate. There might be some money this summer. As we get closer and closer on that, we're not there yet, but what's your gut telling you about what Zach's camp might think about that extra year he has left on his contract?
The messaging was that it was too early. At face value, like you said, Jay, it has seemed crazy that he would think about opting out, but I don't have his age in front of me. Do we remember exactly how old Zach is at this point?
He's 30, and he'll be 31 at the end of this season. So, and if he finished the whole deal, he'd be 32 when that last year expires.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. It's not as much money as it used to be when it comes to today's NBA. It's still a ton of money. But I think the question there is that if it was a, toxic, non-winning, non-enjoyable environment for Zach all the way through this season. And let's just say worst case scenario, they prioritize the young guys. For all we know, Zach, let's say Zach's on the shelf, then just what do you want out of your career standpoint? I don't think you want to spend your, year 31 going into year 32 as a guy who is one of the better bucket getters in the league and enjoys playing the game and averaging 20-plus points, having to basically put all of that on hold just for the sake of, again, not nothing at all. So still would be surprised if he opted out, but, nobody's saying that is as much of a no-brainer as we might have thought.
Yeah, and without knowing what potential deals could be out there, just your again, back to your gut feeling, with the Kings in this situation, specifically with Zach, be better off if he opted out in a sense like that contract would leave the team, or trying to deal him and get something, contract-wise back in return. That's a lot of money coming back.
Yeah, that's the issue is that, and admittedly, I had to clean up some of the draft reporting that I had in that piece. I had it wrong initially about what they have left from the Fox trade and other stuff they have. So the issue is, if you're getting off that Zach LaVine contract, then you're giving up some of the draft capital that the previous front office got in the Fox trade, or just your other stuff. And that's where it gets hard for Scott, is that that is being put into a tough corner, is that you have a bunch of money that people don't have interest in. And the only way to get rid of that money a lot of times is to give up the very things that you need to rebuild this team. Mm-hmm. So, that's where I don't envy the position they're in, because it's one thing to kind of signal like they are that this is potentially a full rebuild. But, we say it all the time, it takes two to tango. And that's where if you make a couple wrong moves and you look up and you have a clean cap sheet with no picks, then that's not necessarily better than where you were before. So, they're going to have to tread lightly here.
Sam, you also mentioned in your piece DeRozan. I think even the team was listed there. The Clippers have shown some interest, and I got to believe a lot of teams would be interested in DeMar. Still a bucket getter, still a veteran that's been a good teammate and knows how to win, that kind of thing. I believe there'd be a good market for him. Where do you think they stand with DeMar DeRozan and teams with interest in what he could provide?
Yeah, I don't have beyond the Clippers' interest, which is, again, that fits right into what we just talked about. Like, the sense I got there was legitimate interest in him, kind of filling that role that they thought Bradley Beal was going to fill. And obviously Brad is now done for the year. And that sounds all well and good, but that they had not intended on having money added beyond this season. Now, DeMar's got $10 million guaranteed for next year, but if they were going to take him on with the Clippers, then, presumably you want him for next year as well, which is at $25 million. So if you're taking on that kind of money, guess what? I know I'm a broken record, but they're going to ask for a pick of some kind. And that's where the Kings don't want to do that. So there's not easy answers with any of this stuff here. The other thing, and this speaks to what we talked about a second ago regarding playing time and who gets prioritized. They need these vets to show out to some extent to create market, because, Sabonis in particular, with him being hurt, I don't know. This is just me talking. I think Sabonis is he's a known commodity. And if you want to build your offense around him and you're interested in that, then I think you should feel pretty confident that that's the guy you're getting if you looked at him right now, and obviously just wait for him to get healthy with this injury, which is not a devastating injury.
Right.
But with Zach and DeMar, I think teams need to see more. They need to see where their game is at, and get excited about that before being willing to really do something with them.
Yeah, and one last kind of player one related to your piece. You mentioned, and when I talked earlier about maybe a few guys being blocked, I think one is Keon, and that's more of, they just have so many guards, and you're playing Russ and Schroeder and DeMar and Zach and Malik, and I get why they're all playing. So Keon's kind of lost in the numbers game. You did say that he's a guy that teams would be interested in. I think the Kings are probably interested in too. What do you think about the future of Keon Ellis?
I think, honestly, he feels very much like somebody who, if they're going to do one of these deals and avoid giving up draft assets, putting Keon in a deal is one way that you can do that. And I think it's not anything against the way they see him. I have sensed for sure, though, a feeling that he's an impact player, he's a two-way guy, obviously a fan favorite, but there is a reticence to, and I'm sure they have a sense of what Keon envisions for himself on the market. There's a reticence to do something with him beyond this season. I don't know what their number is, but I think they definitely know that, like, for that type of a player, you don't want the number to be too exorbitant. So, and it feels like that one is headed towards, and this is, again, we'll see where the season goes, but towards, a likely, call it a divorce or not a long-term relationship. It just feels like they'll probably, take a bunch of calls on Keon and potentially use him to get where they want to go roster building wise.
And the other part about this is you also have to do league-wide evaluating. Like, the team, as much as Scott Perry told you, look, this is an evaluation process of Doug, of their roster. But then, you get 15, 18, 20 games into the season and see what's going on across the league. For example, a team like Milwaukee, who's really struggling. Some other team, the Clippers, who are really struggling. It'll be interesting to see which teams kind of change course and how quickly maybe either panic buttons are hit or just, hey, we've got to kind of tool this whole thing. Is there any sense on any teams in general, Sam, that might be going, look, we got to change our course here pretty quickly?
I mean, a little bit, and I actually think that there's a Kings component to that discussion because, you either are patient. I mean, and really, I felt like Scott was asking for, 3-4 years from the fans in our conversation. But so you're either patient and you go, you strip it down and build with young guys. Or what I am curious about is because I think there are going to be a number of teams putting pretty high-profile guys on the market potentially. I think the Kings are going to be this is, again, just me talking. I think they're going to be tempted to, shortcuts are going to be available for a fair amount of teams in the NBA, potentially. And I'm talking about, and these are all, none of these have developed all the way just yet, but is Ja Morant going to eventually become available? Is Trae Young going to be available? Is LaMelo Ball going to be available? Is Anthony Davis going to be available? Now AD probably should terrify Kings fans. I don't think adding a 35-year-old is the way you're trying to go.
Right.
But all of those other names are dynamic, box office type talents who are in pretty kind of distressed situations right now. Trey's is interesting because the Hawks just have shown an ability to have an identity and be pretty good without him. So that's where you wonder, I mean, honestly, to go full circle with this conversation, Jay, that's where history tells me that at some point Vivek might come kind of bounding into the room and say, I don't know, what do you think about this shiny object? And that's where the autonomy question is going to come in is, does he let them do what they want to do and what they think is prudent, or does he, kind of put his foot on the scale?
Well, I guess we all have to wait and see. I mean, that's the real time. We'll find this all out together. Sam, always appreciate you being available for us. I know you moved up a day. We appreciate that. We always love your work, and I hope you have a safe drive and a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you out at a game soon and talk to you next week.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving, brother.
All right, thank you. That is the great Sam Amick. A lot of info in there. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We tried to get as much as we could with Sam, and he's always on the pulse here of things all league-wide, but there's a lot of stuff going on with the Kings, and I think that's important to continue to monitor them, to monitor the other teams. And look, there's a lot of teams, like he said, that could be moving on from players, and I just hope the Kings, again, kind of stay the course that they're talking about. Like, if the right move is there, do it. I mean, you need to be patient, you need to be smart, but I think everything, my own opinion is to check these boxes, to either get younger, financial freedom, more draft picks in the future. And if it helps you along the way, I'm not anti getting wins. I'm okay with this team winning more, but not to do it in a way where the shortcut is the good word. No shortcuts. Don't go, this veteran will help us get 2 spots higher. If it makes financial sense, that got you another pick, that checks those other boxes, yes, but not to shortcut it and think, let's just make one more run with this group. It feels like it needs the right building, and I think they can do it. I think they can. We'll see if they do it. All right, we'll take the break here. When we come back, we still have